Today's video is with a paid partnership with BetterHelp. Oh, see, it doesn't change anything, does it?
We look like I think we look pretty crispy. Well, let me put some more lights on.
But they're yellow, aren't they? So it'll clash.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. Did that
yeah.
Should we have the big light?
Let's see.
It's not going to add a lot.
That did nothing. That literally did nothing.
That's what I mean.
No one's going to be watching me anyway. They're going to be watching your game in the background.
Well, exactly. Just why do you want me to turn it off?
No, it's fun.
Well, then you're not going to have to tag it with violence or something.
Oh god. Well, hello everyone and welcome back to PhD Diaries 2. There is a game being played in the background. What is the game?
Fallout 4.
Fallout 4. So hopefully, if you're bored by this, that will entertain you far. Basically, this is a video about the realisticness of a PhD journey. As some people have asked me to do, talk about my writing processes, as it were, or how what programs I use. Because I'm a bit of a weirdo, I don't do things like the normal people do. And I thought I'd share insight into that. Because maybe this is a recipe for failure, who knows? But I've been getting through so far, so fine. So I'm going to assume that this works somehow. So a lot of people have asked more, a more, what do you call it, fluid, organised way of doing their PhD. And my version of doing a PhD as a neurodiverse person is more chaotic, but it works for me. The things that work for me are tight deadlines and changing up my system, as it were, changing up how I process the information, how I organise my information. So I don't have one systemic way of taking notes, for example, or even approaching my topic. As of right now, as I'm recording this, I have a deadline to get a whole chapter for a book written by next Tuesday. It is currently Wednesday. I am 4,000 words short of this chapter being done. And I only found out that I got accepted for the chapter last week. So I didn't know I got accepted for this chapter. I would have probably been told, had I been told, a good few months ago. So this is all panic stations, hats on Mr. Mannering? Is it Mannering? Mannering. Is that 40 Towers?
No, it's Dad's Army.
Okay, there we go. So that's how. So I don't know what I'm doing, but I tend to work better with that because you see, I think people are lying sometimes when they think that the PhD is a fluid process. So you have your idea at the beginning, and even if you rumble around in the first year or so, you're still constantly changing it. And I actually almost appreciate the spontaneity of this. So I'm writing a chapter for a particular book. I've been accepted by the book publication. Obviously, you have to go through many stages. And this chapter, if it's fully accepted as it is, will be going to quite a very exciting press, which would be absolutely fabulous for a first publication, particularly in a physical book. I pitched this back in October. I had a concept for this chapter, didn't know I got accepted until last week, which is, at the time I'm recording this, like the middle of March, with a deadline for the 2nd of April. And in between the process of hearing in the middle of March that I got accepted versus now, the idea for my chapter has completely changed. And in that moment of, I don't know, ignition of my inspiration, almost the entirety of my thesis has changed at the same time. And I mean structurally and everything, which actually ignites me. It sounds terrifying in principle. For someone who is far more organised and far more neurotypical, that sounds absolutely terrifying. That I could be technically second year, but in my third year of doing a PhD, and the entirety of my structure has changed, all because I got offered a chapter in another book, potentially, and that inspired me to completely reformat my thesis. That almost excited me more, having that shift in my structure, than almost staying static with the same idea and working on it slowly, because it rejuvenated and gave more purpose to the overall of my project, which never would have happened had I not suddenly given this effective kick up the bum to get a chapter written for another publication elsewhere. But before we go any further, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank today's paid partner, which is BetterHelp. So I've been using BetterHelp for now 3 years, which is a long time. I know, I need all the help I can get. So BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy as accessible and easy to access as possible. And even when you finally get the confidence to go out and find a therapist, finding a good therapist can actually be really hard. But BetterHelp is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy for you to find a therapist. You don't have to go searching for hours or go through all these different websites over the internet or travel to get support. It's entirely online and remote, and you can be matched with a credentialed therapist in as little as a few days after filling out a simple questionnaire. which searches out what you want from a therapist, what you need help with, what kind of therapist you want. Do you want it male, female, LGBTQ friendly, Christian therapist, whatever you need to match your personal tastes. And if it's not a good match the first time, it doesn't matter, because with BetterHelp, you can simply change your therapist like that, no extra charge, and you can find a therapist that suits you without having to spend days, hours, or even weeks or months looking for a therapist. So whether you suffer from depression or anxiety, or just going through a really tricky stage in life, maybe you're changing or you need some help or support, then therapy will give you the tools that you need to approach your life in a different way. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There is a link in the description. It is betterhelp.com/Cinzia. Now, clicking that link supports my channel, but also gets you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. So, how I go about this is panic writing. Panic writing is a very serious topic, obviously, and potentially because I have ADHD, not sure about that, but I work better on very tight deadlines, and for this approach, I go as follows. I think a lot of people don't talk about the notion of academia not being... You're never really prepared for what you're producing. I've been finding, maybe this is again a neurodiverse thing, but you can read everything you want about a particular thing, and when it comes to writing it, you'll find out that everything you've read is completely irrelevant to what you want to write, and you don't know what you actually need to read about until you start writing. So my process with everything is have the idea, start writing immediately with my own thoughts, and then build up on it with theory or other critical analysis, and then start looking for evidence for and against my ideas. Because I approached at the beginning of my PhD the way I approached my undergraduate and my master's, which was basically read about everything all the time. And maybe it's because I'm doing a PhD part-time and I don't have the luxury of just reading all day and not having to worry about an income or other dependents, like even like my dogs and things like that, or my actual job. I don't have the luxury of just relaxing in a library and reading for fun or reading broadly. I have to read very selectively. Now when I'm reading secondary material, it is more of a rapid fire consumption of a lot of information and condense it down to formulate and part of my argument, or formulate parts of an argument I want to go against. So right now with my thesis, for example, I'm looking a lot at narrative and narrative theory, which has been blowing my brain. It's just a minefield of information, and because every theorist has a different approach to narrative. And because every theorist has a different approach to narrative, they're all formulating themselves off one idea and then sprinting out. And you kind of almost have to pick and choose what you want to formulate an idea that you also have. And you have to back up your arguments, but also stay true to a pitch that you want. So the approach to narrative that I want is quite unique to me, but I'm having to balance it with a lot of different theories and then culminate them in a way that works for me and explain that to my reader, so my reader knows my approach to the concept. So a theory and narrative may suit these particular discussions, but I'm already finding that it doesn't match the type of books that I'm looking at. The concepts of them don't translate over, so I'm having to make my own words up and trying to define them myself, which maybe won't go down well. We'll find out, but I quite enjoy the process of having this idea, writing it down, and then seeing if it gets rejected or not, and seeing if other people find flaws in it. That to me is the process that's more exciting than trying to regurgitate information. And I think I was doing more regurgitation as an undergraduate and a master's student than I was a PhD student. It's probably the closest to science a non-science person can get, which isn't saying much because science is actually important and what I'm doing is not. I saw that smile. Nothing I'm doing is important. And I think that approach is helping me in a weird way, as debilitating as it sometimes is, and my life is meaningless. It does take the weight off. If it goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. It may be a waste of money that I failed my PhD, but it's not the end of the world, and also it's not that deep. And thankfully, because I'm not doing a real subject like looking into drug manufacturing for a particular serious illness that people's lives depend on, my faults and my flaws and my errors in judgment are not going to debilitate anyone or damage anyone's lives. It may just cause a bit of controversy with the classicists, which, let's face it, isn't that deep. It may be interesting, but it's really not that deep. It may just cause some little drama on Twitter, but I'm not on Twitter, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. But today has been a bit of a fail day. In terms of, this was the day, I have less than a week to get these words done, and I have done absolutely nothing. And I find that, again, there's a productivity culture where you can hustle, hustle, hustle. I used to do that back in when I was undergraduate and masters. I used to work really hard to get a lot done all the time, and, you know, just be the smartest person in the room. And now I've accepted that I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room, and I'm just doing this more from an experimental point of view. There's much less pressure on me to get it right, and also know that I am shifting the curve, and I'm leaning into that. I accept that my approach to classics as a subject is not traditional in any shape or form, and that may ruffle some feathers, and that actually weirdly excites me in a weird way, because I'd rather be doing something slightly newer and not fitting the mould in terms of academia than fitting in perfectly and being a pedagogical kind of student who's going to be renowned. Yes, that's really fun and awesome, but I'm not naturally that person, and I don't want to be that person either. I'd rather use my time and space to potentially challenge the concepts that I'm looking at than just apply them and regurgitate the same information, because that can be quite boring. So days like today, whilst unproductive in terms of academics, there are days where I have the intention of writing, I do none of it. And then the next day I find that I'm far more recharged to suddenly go in with some new ideas and risk it. And I find that playing with the text and playing with my ideas and letting things flow naturally is far more productive for me as an academic writer than really intense library sessions followed by intense note making and followed by intense writing up. That was just really boring and too static for me to work within that framework. And I've weirdly found that when I've tried to follow the traditional model of studying, that I am slower, I am not enjoying myself, I start hating my subject matter, and also no one likes the work that I'm producing. When I suddenly think outside the box, I come up with an idea that was purely on top of my head, and I pitch it to my supervisor, she immediately says, please write that up. And I'm finding, and then the papers that I produce for her, or writing that I produce for her, on a whim, as it were, have been far more fruitful in terms of discussions with my supervisor, and also for exploration, than me trying to copy and paste other people's work and try and fit into the mould. And potentially, I was discussing this ironically with my therapist today, that I maybe need to lean into that, because maybe that's just, I've been very shamed that that's how I work as a person, and I just feel scatty and messy and not organised. I don't have these beautiful notes that I take everywhere with me, and it's all digitally structured in any shape or form. How I work changes seasonally. Certain chapters work better in this program like Obsidian, other chapters work better in Notion, and other chapters just work in Google Drive. And I'm finding, and I'm not even taking notes really in books anymore, just basically how I work with texts, whether they are secondary texts or primary texts, has completely changed, and is always changing. And I'd be reluctant to even do a video on how does a PhD student do this, like take notes or read books, because it is really different every time I'm approaching it, because the purpose of why I'm reading each time dictates how I take notes, dictates how I interact with the text, and dictates how I think about the text and want to engage with it. And I know it's constantly a building process, and I know at the moment I'm still in skeletal rounds, as they call it, where I'm just kind of just building a skeleton upon which I'll just go deeper and deeper and deeper. But I'm finding now, in my second year of PhD, but technically third year of doing the subject, in that I just have to have my own individual ideas and then build up around them. And even if I find evidence against them, that's part of the research itself. And I'll say, actually, this evidence completely negates my theory that I want to explore. And can I justify going forward if this theory negates what I want to explore? That in of itself is still worth writing up. And I think because I wasn't allowing to show the working out, as my master's thesis dissertation supervisor told me. He said, I want to see your working out. And it's something that I forgot that he said to me all those years ago. God, nearly a decade ago now, he told me this. I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but I remember him saying to me, how you got to this point must have been fascinating and I wish I'd seen it. And I remember kicking myself because even I couldn't remember how I got there. And it's almost like journaling, and I'm seeing the thesis as a project of journaling. So when someone asks me how I'm approaching my writing, that is literally it. At the moment, at this stage of my PhD, it is not clean cut. I can't do a pretty video on look at my Notion pages or look at my note-taking apps in Obsidian, because it doesn't look like that. It's not how I work. It's not going to be transferable to other people. But by the end of my PhD process, I may be able to share more insight into how I laid it all out at the end of the day. I'm obviously not doing scripted videos, and I apologise, it's another diary entry. It is because I had this deadline, and I can't think of anything but the deadline. But you know what? Whilst I only have less than a week to write up 4,000 words, I actually like what I've written. I need to lean into the fact that I actually really enjoy what I'm writing right now. Even though it was really stressful the first few days because I had a new theory that I was applying, I like it. And then what I take away from the feedback that I get from it will just be adding more. It's just more academic insight into how I can improve as a writer and as a researcher, but I like it. And I think that's a new process where I am right now in liking my writing and liking my ideas. So there's small movements in that, but it's not as interesting as this game, which, let's face it, even I've been watching the game in the viewfinder for the entirety of this video. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Sorry it's dark. I'm obviously not in my real setup normally, and it's very, very dark here. I hope you are happy and healthy. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading. Boop!